So I think it's time to begin. Does anyone here not already know what DEX is? What it's about? Yes.
No, I'm really serious. I didn't read any of the blog posts. But I can learn during the session or afterwards. You don't have to explain it just for me.
You should explain it just for me.
Okay, Emmett. DEX is a working group within the Debian project where derivatives can work together with Debian developers to address derivative-related concerns, in particular the merging of the delta from a derivative into Debian.
Oh, excellent.
There are in principle DEX teams within the DEX project for various derivatives. At the moment, the only one that's active is the Ubuntu DEX team. We are close in quantitative terms to finishing our first project, which was to sweep all of the old patches which were submitted to Debian before we started doing user tagging and all that stuff. So they weren't easy to track in status. There were about 200 of them, and all but I think we're down to 2 have been either merged and bug closed, or marked as obsolete because they weren't good anymore. And there are a couple where there are some outstanding questions to be resolved with the maintainer before they can be merged. And yeah, and so obviously that last 2% is going to take 90% of the time, but it has been good progress. There's an Alioth project and a website. It's open for anyone to join who is either a derivative developer or a Debian developer. I think we'll be open to participation from others, but at the moment, the idea is that the people in that project should be able to push changes in both directions.
I'm actually neither, but I'm part of DEX, and I'm a prospective Debian developer and prospective Ubuntu developer. So,
Don't you have percentage upload for certain things? Don't you have percentage upload rates?
not yet. I'm still in fine.
Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. I was just explaining what DEX is, in case anyone was unaware. I unfortunately didn't have my Actio, and I wanted to get the word out so that people could participate remotely.
Okay.
But I didn't, and so I've only just, like I mentioned it on Debian derivatives and Debian Ubuntu, that it's happening, and maybe some folks will join. I did not prepare a specific agenda for this. DEX is a new project. Happy to do Q&A, talk about ideas for future DEX projects that we could do. I have a list of proposed projects already, which I can show you. What's the projectors over there?
Oh, do you want to?
Remember to note.
I was just going to take notes, but I can do that.
Yeah. I was just going to pull up this URL that I'll paste into the IRC channel. Also happy to talk about some of the obstacles that we've run into in trying to get patches merged, and talk about how we can make that better. Oops. Apologize for being so unprepared.
Are there any, it may be completely off topic, so I'll ask it quickly. Are there any thoughts on using DEX as a place for helping people who maintain projects in both Debian and Ubuntu, who are the, actively do package maintenance?
Yeah, sure. I guess I can see those people being interested in participating. What sort of problems do you think we could solve?
So I have a particular project that we were recently going through, starting up a group on the Debian side and going through, are there particular ways of doing our Debian package maintenance that would help us under keeping a tight parallel with leave that to the side. It may be completely out of scope for DEX, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think the derivatives mailing list and the derivatives front desk are definitely a good place to talk about that stuff. The way that DEX is set up, it's all about doing stuff, and so if there's something that needs to be done there,
Specific
then
task
we can do
in
it.
there.
Yeah. George, can you log on to IRC?
No, but if someone could paste the URL into the notes, that would be good.
Okay, I can do that.
My IRC is in the cloud, which in hindsight was probably not a good idea.
Ask a question. So on this DEX web page, it says the Ubuntu DEX team is working to merge changes from Ubuntu into Debian. And this is all well and good when you have a list of changes and you can go through them and get them merged. Can or could or will DEX be able to help with stopping these changes from being there in the first place?
Hopefully, yeah. And if someone working in a derivative needs something changed and feels that it would be better changed in Debian, this is a place where they could go to get help getting that change made.
I think the hard part there is feeling that it would be better changed in Debian is something which, depending on the derivative that the first thing may or may not help with reducing the chance of patches there in the first place.
Sorry?
How do you get people to feel that their change would be better done in Debian first? I think a short way of saying that.
Okay. Yeah.
And DEX help do that.
That's a little bit more out of scope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really wanted to focus on things that we could start and finish.
Sure.
And
It's a constant ongoing thing.
Is this what you want on that?
yeah, so down at the end of that, there is a list of ideas for projects that we could do in the future. Yeah. To follow up the ancient patches one, which is almost done. And so I'm interested in, as I say there, I'm interested in what you think about them and other ideas for DEX projects.
So I don't know how important this is to everyone, but I'd like to see the focus on things that are in Ubuntu but not in Debian yet. Like, you know, now that Unity's out, I think you were trying, but it was like moving way too fast, and we were cutting on patches everywhere. I was wondering if, so is it appropriate for the DEX project to maybe look at those sort of things, like, you know, on a regular basis, or?
Yeah. I think
Or is it, you know, is it a better value for DEX to focus on things like the plumbing and just like the foundation-y type stuff, or
At this point, you know, it's early days. We don't know what the most valuable things are we can do. I'm open to trying lots of different things. And I think some of these things, maybe we'll try them, and it'll be, you know, a big pain for not that much return.
Right.
And we'll say, let's do something different.
Right, okay.
In general, it's probably better to target things specifically like that. One of the things that I heard from people in the new team around one of the two times that it was sort of getting quiescent again, that it was really frustrating to have this ever-growing queue, and that it ended up being something that never finished. And I think that Matt has a very good point about having projects you can start and finish, and I'm not sure that third category falls into it.
Yeah, so if you pull up the DEX webpage again on the other tab, and click through to the Ubuntu DEX team.
Down here?
Yeah. By the way, they really use some help making this website suck less. And yeah, the Ancient Patches project. And if you click on the status page there.
Right here? For status?
Summary. You can see there's a list which is approaching doneness.
Hey!
And that's the kind of pattern that we want to follow for DEX projects. We'll have a defined scope, we'll finish it, we'll move on to something else. And so yeah, this is just a big stack of patches that needed to be reviewed and either filed as bugs if they weren't already, or if they were but they weren't merged yet, about getting them merged. And it is.
Well, lead by example, Matt.
It's a little hard to tell from this, and I'd like to do better tracking in the future. But what you can't see here is how good and how fast we made progress on it over time. Like there was a lot of work that went into getting to this point, and there were a fair number of a lot of these were had been filed in the BTS ages ago and were already closed. That was the majority case. But there were a number of things that had been forgotten, either hadn't been filed in the BTS at all or were languishing there. And it made a real difference in getting that stuff cleaned up. These are all really old bugs, obviously.
In the absence of user tagging, how did you discover this list?
So this was the set of patches which used to be published on people.ubuntu.com/patches.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what actually was the inspiration for this was that we wanted to take that website down. It was just there to host this, directory of 6-year-old patches, but we weren't sure if they were still relevant. So now we know, and we've been able to take that down. And the remaining couple of patches are in the BTS.
So it may be worth, I don't know if it's discoverable, but there's a chunk of things that were put in between the introduction of Ubuntu and the introduction of user tagging, which never went to that website. And it's probably only...
Where did they go? Are they just in Ubuntu?
200, but...
Are they? Where are they now?
They exist in the BTS scenario of those, so they're not. And I don't think anybody has a view of them. But I think we may not care, we can just look at the current status of the versions.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, also, it's like 4.5 years old, so it's...
Right. So in the BTS, but not tagged.
Right.
Right.
So if them stuff that's never got to the BTS or more recently went to the BTS and wasn't tagged.
Yeah, there's nothing more reason than the BTS wasn't tagged, but that's...
Yeah. So yeah, you can see some of the ideas there were things like, why don't we try to get all of the user tagged patches in the BTS that are, say, release critical severity closed, and it's kind of a one-time chunk of work to help reduce that list. Obviously, there's ongoing work needed in all those areas, but I think we can give a little push here and there and demonstrate real progress. Also thought that there are probably a relatively small number of packages which are a real mess in this regard between Debian and Ubuntu, and maybe we could focus on getting those rationalized. And yeah, dealing with packages that are in Ubuntu but not in Debian yet. And it sounds like we had some progress on agreeing what the appropriate procedure was for that. We were going to file RFA bugs.
Yeah. I guess related to the first one, you can make list of packages which are most frequently uploaded in Ubuntu and are also in Debian. So trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or whatever upload into Ubuntu or upload into Debian ratio of upload.
Yeah.
So if it's uploaded to Ubuntu like 15 times, but like once in Debian?
Most frequently uploaded not as a single version.
Oh, okay, right.
Or there are some packages like init Ramifest tools, which just have page after page after page of Ubuntu changes, and we get to get them into sync.
There's going to be relatively few people who can do that. I guess.
Maybe we can do it a chunk at a time, right? Some of those patches, I'm sure.
You can understand some of them, but
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there are some of those cases where folks have kind of given up. We could go in. And there are a few other suggestions that came up in the thread, but I don't know what do folks think would be the best thing first, the most likely.
I think the first one, this one, would be probably the best value. Like
The big merge.
this is a nice to have, but I think this is, if we're looking for long-term health, and even if it was cyclical, right? Like when we have a Debian release kind of aligning up with an LTS last time, we would prioritize this, right? And then
Yeah.
after release, maybe this for a little bit and see how that works out.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably a good longer term investment. I'm a little bit worried that it could get bogged down in it. It's the only thing.
Well, yeah. So maybe compartmentalize this a little bit, depending on.
Maybe take the first 50 packages or something.
Yeah. Even if you did top 10.
there's already a website that's doing these new packages things called like external help system? Is that right?
UEHS is everything that goes on the Debian maintainer, which is the combination of, it's qa.ubuntuwire.com/UEHS.
Is that the Nuba one? Because I think they're on the list too.
The new one, they started from the UEHS, but they have slightly different views.
Oh.
So the UEHS is basically doing the watch file checking for everything that goes on the Debian maintainer. That can be a package that's linked to Ubuntu, but it can also be every single package that's stored on the Debian.
Is this the right URL? UEHS?
qa.ubuntuwire.com. Just go to qa.ubuntuwire.com and those will link from us there.
So it's not that one.
I just
not-
it's
It's closed, but it's not available. However, all the packages that are in Ubuntu and not in Debian are also on qa.ubuntuwire.com under the, there's a tool that does that.
Lucas UDD thing at the beginning for
Lucas
that?
has a UDD thing, and then William also has something he put together based on some old Lucas's code, which is on qa.ubuntuwire.com
Oh.
somewhere.
Yeah.
George?
I put a link in the.
Weren't there also some topics that came up in the Debian session that we
Yeah,
said we should talk
let me
about
pull
them
those
here?
ones up.
I don't know why that's down, sorry.
No, I think it's my wireless or yours. Try again.
Do you have a view on what you think the most promising?
UEHS, like UEHS.
There was a, where was the list?
We don't want to-
There's a link in the notes to it.
Right.
That's what you want to look at.
Right here?
Give me a second
Yeah,
to-
Multi-distro tools. And then if we look at all, it will show us the status of every package of whether it's in Debian, not in Ubuntu, in Ubuntu, not in Debian, in whether it's patched, whether it's a different upstream version, whether it's the same upstream version, all of that. This report's fairly long, but it is generated by cron, and so if you're looking at a static version, it's safe for you all to load. And it gives us a pretty good state. Non-state is the interesting case of 2,500 packages roughly. Some of these, maybe they shouldn't be listed, but
As Steve Langshaw pointed out recently, we had got rather behind at processing elderly removals from Debian because the file that tells us about that in the FTP master side was rotated yearly and we missed rotation. So
it's worth looking through these 2,500. Maybe we can reduce some of them, not by putting them back in Debian, but by getting rid of them entirely.
right, indeed. Is that based on? Is it possible to get one of those based on ERIC? Because I think that will actually be
It
more.
will be based on NERIC as soon as William grants some time, which is probably pretty soon.
Right, so
It's an hour's work
okay,
to
so
do that,
the,
but it's.
so the number not in SID will drop substantially. Steve did a big move in that.
Oh,
Man, this page is hot.
it's huge,
Well, why did you say that before?
because I wanted the URL to be visible to everybody.
Okay, here we
And
go.
actually looking at the text at the top's enough.
So this is not in SID, so
I suspect that it would be useful for that page to collapse the language packs.
Please, file one. I think it's the Ubuntu.
I'm just trying to determine if these
You can
are.
point you to the source at the bottom, and if you file a bug in that project alongside, it'll get fixed at some other time.
Just trying to determine if these are like Ayatollah type stuff or like.
There are
Be
a whole
sorts
collection of all sorts of
There's,
things.
so a lot of them I think will, a lot of them will be kind of one-offs. There are, a lot of them will be Ayatollah or the original installer differences or old use flash stuff or.
This is like multiverse here, right?
Right, there are clusters of various things. There'll be quite a few that come from years back. Mark asked that we sync in a bunch of packages from basically every Debian archive that Dan Holbach could find.
Oh,
So the
and a lot of them will be still
dev.org,
from
everything
us.
listed there got synced in. Most of that's gone. Or we found we found out where it's maintained and actually keep it up to date or nothing.
okay.
Universal.
I think Debian Multimedia, there were a bunch of
Debian
things.
Multimedia is actually a good upstream for Ubuntu for some of the packages, although the number is getting reduced as more of those get integrated.
I haven't seen a sync request for it from that.
Yeah, well, somebody told us not to make any requests from it, so we do things.
Christ.
Okay. I'm not sure.
There's a lot of light time in there.
Anyway, it's, the number is reducing. Startups are doing excellent things to get Debian Multimedia working well enough that we don't need the specialized penalties.
So it looks like it's possible to filter this fairly easily, like get rid of everything that's really in that version of the law.
Right.
Anything that's meant to be on a channel, like anything that's meant to be.
Really,
Like
version
that.
numbers just means that we needed to revert straight version, but it doesn't mean that it's interesting, or it's not interesting to get into Debian or review for getting into Debian.
I mean, if it's really 1.3.4,
Yeah.
1.3.4 is Debian.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen a couple of those that has anything built in it.
Oh, no. Every single one of these is current, was not found in the last check.
That whole package is not that.
Right, and in the next chunk, there's comparison of versions and whatnot, but it's fairly intelligent about parsing things.
Oh,
So these are known removed.
right.
So I guess this is the big chunk that Alvin mentioned, all that stuff in SIG, which.
Yeah, the big
wasn't-
chunk is removed.
But that's a separate chunk from the.
Although it's entirely possible that this page suffers from the same problem that it only possesses removals from this year. Because the link at the bottom only goes to this year's removable log.
People who worked on this are not here, but either Lucas or William, so.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, just knowing it exists is a good help.
Yeah, I'm pleased saying, if you want to look at QA stuff and if you can't find it, take a look at where we have a bunch of tools we haven't done somewhere else.
So 2,600 is a scary number. This one isn't so bad. So this probably means we're carrying
Yeah.
something that might be worth looking at.
This means that we have a divergence from Debian, but that divergence is not related to any upstream changes.
So these are pure packaging.
These are, well, no, they're pure, they're.
It's an Ubuntu Delta.
Oh, right. So this seems like a better number to me than.
So the orange toggle matches in these cases.
That's not actually checked, there's a different list.
It's got the
that
same
gave me
version.
A while ago that tells me which orange tar balls should be the same and aren't, but that's a separate issue. And we should fix that problem, it's complicated and.
Anything interesting here?
We've had a new member of the Ubuntu UDS team since we sat down here.
I'm just interested to know, like,
So, I mean, of the sort of suggestions, which I think are reasonable ones for the next Ubuntu UDS project, my feelings generally that new packages certainly covers a lot of interesting stuff, but there's also quite a lot of noise in that list. But I think the killer for me is that that tends to not have an obvious owner on the Debian side. Whereas in the case of big merges, there's an obvious owner on the Debian side, and you may well actually be making that person, that set of people, rather happier as a result. And it sort of seems to me that there's more social win in merging changes to existing packages.
right.
Or discarding.
Right, like, so every time that VO blogs, a person's like, I really want this app, Peter, or you get more of a happier feeling than it's like, well,
But
I fixed
mean,
the Delta electric sheet.
It does vary a bit. It's not it's not black and white. In the case of
Right.
so in the case of app.rfs snapshot, that's a new package, but it's kind of strongly associated with an existing one.
Okay.
There's an obvious owner in that case,
Okay.
which is different from the case of
Ayatollah.
I was going to skip Ayatollah because there are people who are interested in that, but $random package that has been uploaded directly to the tree at one point, but nobody really cares about inside. I don't think that's as much of a, while that's a good thing to get into Debian, I don't think it's as much of an obvious social win, an obvious sort of collaborative.
No one cares about it. Whoa, let's be careful about how much we do this, because nobody cares about multiple categories. Nobody cares about it, but it has lots and lots of users. Nobody cares about it and it's orphan. Nobody cares about it and it's only Ubuntu and it doesn't work.
Yeah, there's different levels of nobody
Yeah.
cares.
We have a whole bunch of packages where we put in patches in Ubuntu because it was orphaned and we weren't working well with Debian Q18. That's all sort of working with Debian Q18, but we might have some leftovers during the short time that we were having trouble working with that team.
So if the sandboxing stuff comes in, it should be possible to ditch a lot of stuff that people are worried about. If you just run it under a show to some previous version.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of stuff where it'd be easier to say, no, we're deleting it out of the current thing, but it is still there in the previous version.
It depends on the use.
Was your comment referring to specifically the big merges one, or just anyone that involves?
I think to the big merges one.
Okay.
Do we have merges sorted by size but excluding auto-generated CRUD?
I don't think so, but it would be easy enough to do. But George suggested the same one for a different reason, so I think that's a pretty good. So,
Out of interest, what was your reason?
So,
I'm sorry, Dan.
yeah, sorry, train change. So he was talking about these merges here.
Yeah.
Maybe there's so many, just sort by top 10 by the size of like delta, or whether it's a main or not, or you know.
he was saying it would be a better long-term investment just because of those things.
Right. So
Because they're-
I would say these are nice to have and stuff like this, but this is the kind of stuff that's healthier for both projects over the long run, right?
Okay. I agree with
Especially
your
when the
reason.
projects align on release like last time. You know?
I agree with your reasons.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think I just derived from one of your ideas.
So that sounds good to me. Say we do that. Let's go
Okay.
float it on the mailing list and see how it goes over.
Okay. So do you want an action on that, or?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Well, we're on video, so helps with the noting. Propose.
Oh, and just in case anyone didn't know for some reason, Zach is awesome.
Yeah.
He's been a great help in getting this off the ground and.
Yeah, he had a conflict of schedule, so unfortunately he couldn't be here, but. Okay.
Do we have any statistics about how big the patches are, or for example, how many Ubuntu uploads were since the last merge, or something like that? You can just sort a list and see which are the worst packages.
Ubuntu uploads for the last merge, just approximate the version number, I'm sure, tell the version number, but yeah, it should be fairly quick to pull that off patches.ubuntu.com. Yep, which has just current patches. So, sorry, that doesn't really answer your question about statistics. I don't think we actually have stats. The answer is no, but it's not a massive data gathering project.
It'd be nice to have this data in this QA page. You have additional columns where you can see so many uploads and so on.
Or if somebody would like to propose a bit of code change to Mergematic that adds the patch size or scale by some measurement as a column that you could then sort on, then that would be another interesting way to do it.
Just seeing if you affected by rudimentary measurements of contributions. Hey, all right.
I think EG in it wrong first perhaps, I'm sure that's the only thing we want to concentrate on.
What's that?
I think EG in it wrong first perhaps rather than IE. But as in, I mean, that's probably not the only
Yeah.
thing.
So there are about a dozen or so people signed up for the Ubuntu UDS team. Right now, I would love to see more, like some more activity on the mailing list and folks, chiming into discussions and things. I'm trying to keep the momentum going, and I could really use some help.
Not much I can do as patches, but I will at least
I mean, I sort of find in my in the work that I do, I tend to find that it's because I have kind of upload or ownership of sufficient stuff. I find the quickest way for me to progress things is often to deal with the things I've been putting on myself. So, spending a bit of time on merging a bunch of grub patches is kind of a quick and easy win from my point of view. That sort of means that I find it hard to chatter about it lots because it's it kind of feels like just standard operation. But more of it. Is there some way that those of us, Steve Anshek may well be the same way, Mark Pitt might well be the same way, the people with lots of existing Debian activity and ownership, right, will probably do the same kind of thing. So some way that we can help with statistics and things without it just being like blowing your own trumpets.
Right.
What kind of statistics?
Well, I simply want to be collecting some kind of stats or measuring how well we're doing.
Yeah.
On the big merges.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we do it like this,
Or I mean, is that a good strategy, or should we be trying to branch out?
I think it's good to measure it for progress, but I don't think it's something that would be like MBT said we should just start measuring everything we do anyway, right? To see if we're being effective, and if that helps the perception that we're not doing anything, then that's great. But I'm not gonna have a blog post on how amazing we are or something like that. It's just gonna be lead by doing it.
Okay. Yeah.
That seems like the proper approach.
Yeah, I mean, here in this case, like the main reason that I added a column to the data for an owner for it was so that people didn't duplicate work. Like you could claim
exactly,
it and somebody else wouldn't come along. Yeah, and a lot of them, there was no point in filling it in because there was no work to be done. But, maybe we could talk about a couple of the non-trivial cases from ancient patches, which might generate some discussion. The DHCP patch and the syskloD patch were the most interesting ones, I think.
Which one?
The droot server one, both of them, but yeah, actually both of them. So the client send hostname patch, that was the patch to have the client by default send the hostname to the server, so you could generate the DHCP server could send a configuration based on its name. And that has apparently been implemented a different way upstream in a newer version of the DHCP server, which is not yet packaged in Debian. It was released last summer or so it's been out for a while. But Debian is lagging behind upstream on that. So it's sort of blocked on getting a new version. But the good news is it'll get fixed more or less automatically when that new version is brought in.
That kind of seems like the sort of thing that will get sorted out. Maybe don't need to worry about it, except in do we need to talk to Andrew Pollock about whether he needs general help with that?
Yeah, which brings us to the second one, the derooting server patch. That's that's something which is not going to get fixed on its own, and I think it's a material benefit to Ubuntu and Debian users to not have the client running as root.
Right. So I have a naive question then. So if it's been out for a while and it hasn't synced to Debian yet, and you're doing the work in Ubuntu, Is it one of those cases where that patch should go directly upstream so that when Debian syncs,
Yeah.
they get that? Or
I don't know if that patch went upstream or if upstream. I think upstream implemented it in a different way. Like the approach that we had taken in Ubuntu, they did something more general.
Okay.
I think, and so it should be obsoleted by the upstream version.
Okay.
But the derouting patch, it's in the BTS. Had a conversation with the maintainer, with Andrew Pollock about it, with one of the maintainers. It's a team, and his view is he wants the package to be as close to upstream as possible, and therefore he doesn't want to add any patches, full stop. Which I don't know how common a view that is among Debian maintainers.
I guess my view on that depends on what the consequence is. So sometimes people say that it's very hard to separate them from just clouding and elements discussions. Sometimes the position is, I don't want to add any distribution-specific patches because I'm actively working with upstream to get everything upstream. Sometimes the position is, I don't want to add any distribution patches because I'm lazy. And it's roughly impossible to tell the difference between those casually or en masse.
So his, in this particular case, the maintainer has a relationship with upstream, wants everything to get upstream, but has little time for Debian work at the moment.
This is a reduced case of the common case of the kernel. I mean, the general kernel, pretty much many kernel teams take the attitude that everything needs to go upstream, essentially, I think, largely including our own, as a method of keeping themselves safe.
So the maintainer looked at this patch, forwarded it upstream. Upstream has a non-public bug tracker, so we can't really see what's going on with it upstream. And so it's a little bit in limbo at the moment. I mean, my view on this is that there's probably a good case to be made for making a temporary exception and getting the patch in and getting it testing and getting the benefits to users while working to get it upstream. But I'm not trying to push the maintainer to change their policy or anything. It's just my view.
Okay. And the other patches you want to do?
The other was a syskloggd patch, which was also a derouting patch. So that at the particular point in time where all these patches came from, that was a big focus for us. Yeah, and that bug obviously predates Ubuntu as well, but it's a really old bug. Ubuntu, we fixed it in Ubuntu. It was filed in Debian at the time, and it didn't really get a response.
Oh, so this was like last week.
Yeah. So what we did was, we tried to we pinged the maintainer from time to time. We brought the patch up to date for the current version. Sent the diff to the maintainer. Didn't really get a response, and uploaded it as a delayed NMU, 15 days. So the patch was it was all done. It was in, but if the maintainer had a problem with it, there was 2 weeks to intervene, and it went in just a few days ago. Zach sponsored it.
When you decide to NMU in this case, as opposed to all of the other ones?
So as opposed to which?
Well, there's tons of bugs on this list. I presume some of them also started by then.
No, this was like, there were only a handful that were outstanding. This was one of them.
Okay, so this was just these bugs that are outstanding.
Well, our goal was to get all of those patches merged, and some of them were already done, some of them were not done, and we could do them right away, like working with the maintainers. And in other cases, they were blocked, and in this case, there was honestly not a lot of response from the maintainer on it. And talking with Zach, I mean, he has a pretty progressive view on NMUs. And you know, even though it's a wish list bug, it's a patch that's been in Ubuntu for years and years and years. It's pretty well tested. Obviously, we had to modify it a bit to merge into Debian, but now it's there. And Martin has pointed out that we could probably simplify it quite a bit now that the kernel has been fixed. So those were the interesting cases where it wasn't just a matter of let's get this patch merged, work with the maintainer, get it done.
Okay. You had some stuff that we brought up in the first Debian session that we kind of pumped into this.
No, he
don't know.
He wasn't in the first Debian session.
Oh,
There's something you signed to him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, what are my assignments?
Do you remember the one about RFA bugs or packages and?
Oh, yes.
That one.
Yes, I remember. I couldn't figure out, frankly, where to put that in the documentation because I find myself lost in what the intended landing pages are for anything.
Yeah, maybe we should probably talk about that and fix it, because it got bad and everybody was working on it a step away, and now it's trying to work.
What day did we have that? Tuesday. Working on those. Although I have actually seen people doing RFAs, and there's something I think I did the wiki about that.
Maybe you did more than you remember.
No, maybe, well, I also have a sleep wikiing disorder.
Is it unlikely?
And would you be able to tell the difference between this and
Was that the only one with RFA one? Or was
There was something else that Laura remembered though. We talked about that one too.
Yeah, I think you've had this task since like, the first time you were in platform.
We're out of time.
No, it's 5 after.
Oh.
Well, wait, that's not break time. No, the next session starts at 5 after. Oh, really?
Yeah, this is a short session. This is a 45-minute.